In this video, we're going to take a look at Iroshizuku's Kon peki, or Cerulean Blue. And as always, down in the description are timestamps so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, it really does help me for you to check out the entire video. Also down in the description, you're going to see a link to the Blue Ink playlist, so if you'd like to see more blues, that's where you'll find them. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading. Kon starts a little darker, gets a little lighter. Peki starts lighter, gets darker. Extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, decent shading. Brown starts dark and gets light. The is very dark. Lazy starts dark and gets light just at the Y. 6 seconds to dry. The extra fine is the same tone as the medium is the same tone as the extra fine. With no feather spread, halo sheen, some decent shading, quick going darker to lighter to darker, over going lighter to darker, lazy going darker to lighter, 10 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show good color variation, and we are getting it. In the smear test, yes, you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then, a Pelikan M1000 with a fine nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 11 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 27 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both are showing a little bit of color variation, but I'm not seeing it in the writing, and a smear test there is a chance that you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, it's immediately put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this is a true blue. It starts lighter, pushes its way darker as it's moving up. Now all of that lighter is really just the watered down version as it's moving up. We see the faintest bit of a line at the bottom, which is interesting when we see the next one, the one on the right that's allowed to dry for 10 minutes. And we do see that it started to form a little bit of a line at the bottom. The rest of it pushed its way up, so it really does look split, where some stayed and some went. It does suggest that there could be some resistance for this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is lighter than a stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does have spots of shading. Look at how the is darker than the word quick, even though quick goes dark to light to dark and brown goes dark to light. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is a tad bit darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading. Brown going darker to lighter to dark on the end. Jumps goes light to dark. 13 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show color variation, and we are getting color variation, and the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on a page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself fairly well. It does have a little bit of blurriness that gets going on there, which means you might not want to use it in a note-taking situation. It's much more of a dealer's choice thing. I don't highlight a lot in notes unless I'm expecting to. So I wouldn't use this for that reason if I expected to be able to go back and highlight. Now the interesting thing as we move towards the water is you see the red sheen that appears in the swatch, which is really a reason I do not like swatches when it comes to seeing what a color looks like, because I never saw any of that red sheen in any writing. Water is only lifting some of this ink, but it's really leaving plenty of it in place. It gives the idea that this could be very resistant. However, It only took water to get it out of my pen, as you would expect with most every Pilot ink. And the pen flush, surprisingly, really is only lifting about as much as water did. I had expected these to do much better on this, but this is paper and not the pen. The 1/3 bleach solution is removing most of the ink. It is leaving a little bit of it behind. But again, it only took water to get this out of my pen. The next writing sample is done on Fabriano Eco Qua. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading. Brown goes light to dark. Dark to light. Lazy goes dark to light. The is very dark, especially compared to what's around it. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen. I'm really not seeing the shading here. 8 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show good color variation, though I didn't get to see it in the medium, but this is a little bit more absorbent paper. And a smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, and the realm of normal was 2.1 to 2.9. Iroshizuku's Kon peki, or Cerulean Blue, has a viscosity of 1.81, making it just a little bit wetter than normal. Now, if you're interested in how the viscosity and all that's done, then there's a link to that video down in the description. The next writing sample is done on Leuchtturm 1917 paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer little spots of shading. The I in Iroshizuku's darker than the RO. The H is much darker than what's around. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading. The K in quick is darker. The B in brown is darker. The is much darker than what's around it, and 5 seconds to dry. Medium is dark like the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading again. The B in brown. Fox is very dark compared to the end of brown. Over starts a little lighter and gets darker. 8 seconds to dry. Now both show some color variation. It's there. It's not always as easy to see, but it's definitely there. And a smear test you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, and the realm of normal was 13 to 21 seconds. Iroshizuku's Kon peki has an average dry time of 12 seconds, making it dry faster than normal. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper. Now, there's no question about any of the ghosting that's going on, and that's because the ink is getting quite deep into the page. The key points here are this dot, and this dot, and this dot, and this dot, and this dot. All of the darker spots came through, touched the page underneath. That's quite a few spots touching the next page, totally corrupting the next set of notes. I don't know if it is or not, but it sort of matters. I do math, and rogue dots might matter if that was a graph. I wouldn't use the back of the page, and I don't know about using this ink on this paper. The medium has a ton of feathering the entire way through. It is all tiny feathering. It is a little bothersome to me, but it might not be bothersome to most people. It does have a little bit of spread to just under a broad with no halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the medium. It also has feathering, tiny feathering, the entire of it tiny feathering, but smaller feathers than the medium. So much more manageable, in my opinion, here. And when we look at the spots that came through, it only had one spot that came through. For me, that's a problem. Any spots that touch the next page for me are a big problem, but it doesn't mean it's a big problem for you. Now, it does spread to about a fine. It has no halo sheen, no shade, and 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows color variation, but the writing sample had none. And the smear test, you can't smear it, so you don't have to worry about it. Instead of finding an ink that looks like Iroshizuku's Kon peki or Cerulean Blue, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, this is a very beloved blue, so you have to choose a great ink to go along with it, and I chose a great orange, another beloved ink by Diamine, their Autumn Oak. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those different playlists. So what do I think of Pilot Iroshizuku's Kon peki, or Cerulean Blue? I have a couple of bottles of blue inks. Just a few. That didn't stop me from getting a bottle of this when I sampled it. It does give decent shading. It can be a light or dark tone depending on the pen. This is my favorite pen for this ink, though. What nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? I would prefer it in a very wet medium, or, like the pen I prefer to put this ink into, a very wet Pelican Fine. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video we're going to take a look at Ackerman No. 1 Passage Blue.